Today, we are being joined by Senior Advocate Sriram Panchu, who, along with legal jurist Fali Nariman, as well as former Supreme Court Judge Justice Madan P. Lokur, has written to the Supreme Court Collegium, raising a very crucial question regarding the appointment of Justice S Muralidhar and why he was not elevated to the Supreme Court of India. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us and speaking to India today. Can you start with telling us what prompted three of the brightest legal minds in the country to pose this question to the Supreme Court College?
Well, firstly, it was not a letter addressed to the Collegium.
Right.
It was an article written. The Express gave it the heading of, a question to the Collegium, but it wasn't a letter written to the Collegium. Now, the reason we wrote this is that we were very disturbed by the fact that such a first-class judge, a judge who is first class by virtue of his judgments, a judge who is first class by virtue of his integrity, and a judge who is first class by virtue of the leadership he has shown in the Orissa High Court, tremendous leadership. We were disturbed that he did not make it to the Supreme Court. But beyond that, the larger questions we had in mind was, if this is what is going to happen to Justice Muralidhar, what message is this going to send to every good judge in the country?
Right.
What message is it going to send to every lawyer who's thinking, should I accept a judgeship or not accept a judgeship? And we also wrote this because it raises larger questions about the functioning of the Collegium. See, many of us have been supporters of the Collegium. We are not people who want the government should take over the role of appointing judges. We are supporters of the fact that the judiciary should have the primary voice. But if the Collegium is just 5 judges and nobody else, then it leads to problems. It leads to the fact that there's nobody over there. It leads to the fact,
sorry to interrupt you.
It leads to the fact that nobody is there in the Collegium to voice these questions. So maybe we should look at a different composition. So we wrote this to raise, these are the fundamental issues. Muralidhar is the focus of the piece, but Muralidhar is not the only issue in the piece.
Right. Like you said, that the complete power regarding appointments cannot be given to the government. But as things stand currently, don't you think that by not pushing the files through of the names that the government does not agree with, the government is still holding on to majority of the power, especially considering that the Collegium is not doing anything to compel the government to push these files through?
So the point you're making is that if the Collegium does not push forth the names which it thinks will not be liked by the government, then really by default, the government is controlling.
Correct.
So therefore, I think we need answers to the questions we've raised. We don't know. I mean, we are supposing, we are presuming, but we don't know. So I think this is a case where we need answers. I mean, if the Collegium comes back and says, you're mistaken, we did try something. We did move a file. We made a recommendation. But that didn't find favor with government. That's an answer. Or if the Collegium says we didn't do anything, then I think we will ask the Collegium, why didn't you do anything? Because not doing anything raises speculation. Such a good judge, and why is his name not going through? And this is not the first instance. There have been other, very good judges who haven't made it to the top court for not very obvious reasons, not very obvious good reasons.
But even when Justice Muralidhar was recommended to take over as the Chief Justice of the Madras High Court, and the government did not make his appointment happen, even in that case, the Collegium ultimately withdrew their recommendation. So, do you think there's a fundamental flaw in the current process and how it's being implemented, so that judges that the government essentially does not agree with, or judges who've given orders against the government, actually will not hold actual real positions of power?
You see, this is what the man in the street is going to say.
Correct.
This is what the man in the street is going to say. that, if a judge passes an order against a government, or a judge denies bail to somebody who later on becomes very powerful in government, then he's going to be, punished for it. This is what the man in the street will say. That is why I think we need to correct ourselves. We need to correct ourselves. We can't afford to have this state of affairs where we give rise to speculation that no, the government, the Collegium will not hold sway if the government wants to have its way. We can't afford to have that. So I think these are times for deep introspection.
How urgent do you think is there a need to bring about a change in the current process of appointment?
How urgent?
How urgent?
I think it should have happened day before yesterday.
Right. Extremely pressing, that means.
Very pressing, very pressing. These are important matters. High Court judges have the power of life and death. They have huge powers, huge jurisdictions. So the appointment of a High Court judge, the appointment of a Supreme Court judge is crucial for not only for law, but crucial for governance, crucial for democracy. And we can't afford to not get the right people there, and we can't afford to let the not so good people come in there.
In your expert opinion, do you think that the collegium system of appointing judges has failed, or do you think it only needs to be tweaked?
I wouldn't say it's failed. Let's also face it, the Collegium has appointed a large number of good people as judges.
Correct.
So I would not say it's failed. But I would also say it has not appointed some very good people. And it has appointed some, not so desirable people. But beyond that is also the nature of the Collegium. It is opaque. It is not transparent. It is just a group of 5 people. We don't know what happens over there. There's no one to ask. There's no one to know. And when you have such a small group, in any system in society, when you have such a small group, then, you start getting a little bit of favoritism. I'm not targeting the Collegium, but I'm saying any small group, will bring in elements of favoritism, this one is important to me, let's get him through. That one is important to you, okay, I'll agree to that. And then, there are also these things of, are too many judges' children being appointed?
Right.
There was an article on that, drawing attention to that. So these kind of, things will surface, will be there. That's, transparency is sunshine. Sunshine is a disinfectant. The minute you have to be transparent, you have to better your behavior, you have to better your results, you have to better your functioning. There is nothing like transparency. So I think we need to pay grave attention, not only to the individuals, but to the process. If we can have more transparency and more participation from a source, not exclusively the Collegium, but from another source. But nobody is asking that the judges should lose the majority. Nobody is saying that. Judges should have the majority to decide, because this is India. This is not other countries where they work in different systems. In India, judges should have the majority, but they shouldn't have exclusivity. Exclusivity leads to problems.
And by exclusivity, you mean the fact that the top 5 judges are the only ones.
Yeah, just the 5.
To take a call.
Yeah, that's exclusivity.
Okay. I know your throat is not keeping well, so I won't take too much of your time. Just one last question before I let you go. What are you hoping to achieve? I know that the question that you've asked the Supreme Court is more rhetorical than anything else. It's more for their self-introspection. I don't think you're actually expecting the Collegium to come back with a response on what happened regarding Justice Muralidhar's elevation. But are you hoping that this will at least bring the Supreme Court to think within and think of a need for change in the system itself?
Actually, sorry, Nalini, isn't it?
Yeah.
Actually, Nalini, I am hoping for something more.
Okay.
I'm hoping that the Collegium will respond sensitively to this question Sorry. I have a cup that says the Constitution of India,
Oh, wow.
and it says liberty, equality, fraternity,
Justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. Yes.
and my old school motto, and it says be vigilant. It's very important. So I'm hoping the Collegium will respond with sensitivity. That these questions are being raised by some senior people. That they're not the only ones. A lot of people are asking these questions, and therefore we should share our views. But even if the Collegium were to say, we made a mistake, we should have processed his name. You're right. That's a great thing. To acknowledge that something was not done is a great thing, and it will go to the Collegium's credit. Or the Collegium can say, well, we tried. This is what we tried, and we did not succeed. Good. Or if the Collegium wants to, pick holes in our article and say, well, you think he's a very fine judge, but we think he's not for these reasons. By all means, yes. So, but silence doesn't please anybody. It's not really an appropriate. We're a democracy. We're a democracy. Everybody is accountable for their actions. Everybody is accountable, and so long as you ask the questions, in the right way, without casting aspersions or without, I think it deserves to be looked at.
Right. With that note, thank you so much, Mr. Panchu, for joining us, taking your time out, and speaking to India Today about an issue that I'm sure is very important, not just to the authors of this piece in the Indian Express, but to every citizen who's impacted by the justice delivery system in the country.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir.